cooperators, Just Us Coffee Roasters, Cooperative Housing Federation of Canada, and the Ontario Cooperative Association. Also, a big thanks to the volunteers and workers, the speakers, presenters, facilitators who have volunteered their time to help make this event a success. And last but not least, I want to thank CWCF staff and board for all the work organizing this event. Hey, and I want to mention that we are going to have a social solidarity pub night on Tuesday, November 23rd from 7 till 9 Eastern Standard Time. So we're just to have a little bit of social time. We thought we'd give everybody a little bit of time after the conference because they might be zoomed out, but then we could get together just for a little bit of fun and social time networking. All right, so I'm going to turn it back to Susanna again.
Thank you so much, Reba. I really appreciate those housekeeping details and for having that intro. If we can go to the next slide, please. So welcome everyone to our session. I'm so glad that you're joining us here today. I just want to say and introduce what we're going to be talking about, and that today we're going to be hearing from a fantastic roster of speakers and their work from different places in Canada, speaking to their experiences in building better racial justice within their cooperative models. If you're attending, or you're not a worker co-op or not a cooperative, that's still even okay, and the session is still for you. These principles we discuss are going to be for all of us to consider and think about in approaches towards better justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, which I will briefly get into in a moment. But first, and before I introduce our speakers, I would like to acknowledge the land I'm calling in from is Takaranto, Toronto, home to many nations, past and present, including the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, the Métis, and the Mississaugas of the First Credit. The Canadian Worker Co-op Federation gratefully and respectfully acknowledges the traditional, ancestral, unceded territories of Indigenous peoples whose presence reaches back to time immemorial, and whose territories we live and work. CWCF recognizes that land acknowledgements are not enough. Regarding the actions that CWCF is taking and will take, it has recently been approved an action plan to build justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in the worker co-op movement. Next slide, please. So a little bit about myself and why I've been asked to lead this session here today. My name is Susanna. I'm the communications coordinator at the local food and farm cooperatives, a second-tier co-op supporting the development of food and farm cooperatives and initiatives throughout Ontario. I'm also a master's student at York University, studying the intersections of cooperatives, BIPOC food sovereignty, and climate justice. This research of mine led me to collaborating with and joining the team at Freedom Dreams Cooperative Education. And just a shout out to having that session that's later on tonight at 6 p.m. So don't miss that. It's going to be our third episode in our current series, which is a co-op that provides an educational avenue to learn about BIPOC cooperatives, both formalized with the model you're surely familiar with, regarding the bylaws and corporation, as well as elevating the voices and efforts in cultural revitalization of cooperative economies, whether it be through ROSCAs, rotating savings and credit associations, also known by other names such as SUSU in parts of the Caribbean or West Africa, CHIT in India, Tandas in Latin America, or other alternative means of cooperation. This combination of work and schooling led me to being invited to join the JEDI committee at CWCF, following a powerful online workshop led by Victor Beausoleil at CETSI and Dr. Jessica Gordon-Nemhart. Next slide, please. So why JEDI? You're going to hear this a little bit. I'm going to unpack a few terms that will come up in this session and reasons why building racial justice is important. JEDI stands for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And I much prefer this term to anti-racism and anti-oppression, which may already have some of us feeling a little bit anxious. If we're talking about anti-something, there's already a division. With JEDI, everyone can get behind this. Everyone can see themselves in moving towards justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion because it includes all of us. Plus, it sounds cool. If you're a JEDI, you're already a hero for stepping into this work and being open to this conversation. BIPOC is a term that refers to Black, Indigenous people of color, so recognizing a wide range of racialized identities. And here's an example of why JEDI work is important and why worker co-ops have a role in this conversation. So with this diagram, here we're looking at, we're illustrating why we need to embody all principles of JEDI within our work. For those of us in the room who've tried to build more diversity and inclusion in our work environments, this may be a familiar pattern when recruiting or hiring for positions to bring in a diverse perspective. However, when a position is hired for the purpose of inclusion only, without decision-making power on a board or upper management staff, this only pays lip service to the workers of visible minority. Let's keep in mind that we cannot simply rely upon a single person to bring an entire perspective that reflects the communities they represent, particularly without changing the supportive structures in the workplace. This is a recipe for high turnover. This is why worker co-ops are important to the disruption of this pattern. Hiring for positions that are meaningful, impactful, and have board authority or decision-making worker power, along with being open to structural and supportive changes in workplace culture. This provides a path towards progress instead of surface level inclusion and embodies more fulsomely the principles of JEDI. Next slide, please. Today, we are pleased to welcome a range of speakers who will touch on their experiences relating to these concepts of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So first, we're going to have Reba Plummer speak, who just introduced us a little bit ago. Reba lives in Toronto and is the CWCF Ontario Region Director. She has worked at Urbane Cyclist Cooperative since 2000. She completed the Co-op Management Certificate through Ontario Co-op Association at the Schulich School of Business in April of 2010. She's been a member of the Toronto cycling community since the mid-1980s and was the 1999 and 2008 Cycle Messenger World Champion, Cargo Bike Racing Division. In 2002, she worked as a mechanic teacher with Open Roads, the funded version of what became the popular volunteer run Wenches with Wrenches. She joined the CWCF board in 2010 and was elected president in November 2016. Lucenia Ortiz currently serves on the board of directors for the Multicultural Health Brokers, MCHB Cooperative, since 2020. From her experience as a newcomer in the Philippines in 1994, she developed a passion and commitment to work with culturally diverse communities and creating opportunities to support their advancement in the new homeland. She served for almost a decade as co-executive director of MCHB Co-op, where she was involved in numerous initiatives to promote the health and well-being of immigrants and refugees in the city. Lucenia holds a PhD in human ecology at the University of Alberta, where she researched the multicultural health brokering practice and how this aligns with the values and principles of worker cooperatives. Next, we have Wunmi Akinlosutu. Wunmi is the CEO and founder of Blooming Ladies Global. She has a passion for empowering women through entrepreneurship. She has supported female entrepreneurs from diverse cultures and industries, both locally and internationally. She has a wealth of experience working in startups for profit, nonprofits, and now cooperatives. She has a bachelor's degree in management and accounting and a master's in business administration, as well as certifications in professional coaching and neuro-linguistic programming. Mike DeGagne grew up on his father's family farm outside North Bay, Ontario, studied geomatics and spatial analysis at the University of Ottawa, and has been working as a carpenter for 15 years. After living away from the North for a decade, Mike returned to start an off-grid homestead, cooperative, and land trust with his family near Timmins, Ontario. The Black River Worker Co-op, a not-for-profit with the aim of protecting and preserving agricultural land in the North to make it accessible for young families who would otherwise not have access, is a homestead farm that thrives using the principles of permaculture, social enterprises, equality, and fairness. With regenerative agriculture, regenerative economics, and community living at heart, Mike is proud to co-chair the Black River Cooperative and now represent the local food and farm co-ops as a Northeast Regional Coordinator in the movement towards a sustainable future for all. I'm so excited to hear from all our speakers today. So next, we're going to have Reba speak about the JEDI committee. And I'm going to pass it over to her. She's going to be covering how the committee from CWCF came to be, our progress over the last year, including our action plan. And take it away, Reba.
Thank you, Susanna. So as you've already heard, I'm Reba Plummer, president of the CWCF Board of Directors and a member of the JEDI committee. It's my pleasure today to introduce the CWCF Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, the JEDI committee, and give you some insights on how and why it was formed and present the CWCF Racial Justice Action Plan and some of our results so far. So how did the committee get started? After our successful 2020 AGM keynote speaker, Dr. Jessica Gordon M. Hart, inspired us with her talk on diversity and inclusion aren't enough, practical tools for worker co-ops and the worker co-op movement, we formed the JEDI committee. As our board and staff are not BIPOC, we considered ways to get other voices on the committee. In April, we hosted a workshop and invited as many BIPOC folks and allies as possible. From this workshop, we were able to expand the composition of the JEDI committee and create an action plan. So right now, I'd like to introduce the JEDI committee. We have Hazel Corcoran, the executive director of CWCF, Kay Grant, communications manager of CWCF, myself as president, Victor Beausoleil, the executive director of social economy through social inclusion, Christine Clark, the founder of Freedom Dreams Co-op, Lori Cook from iMove, Susanna Redikoff, the communications coordinator of local food and farm co-ops, Tim Burns from Libra Knowledge and Information Services Cooperative, and Alexi Rodriguez from iMove. So we also would like to invite any interested folks who would like to join this committee. We're very interested to get more folks here. So we have our CWCF JEDI, or really our Racial Justice Action Plan, which the Board of Directors approved on September 23rd of this year. So our long-term objective is a worker cooperative movement in Canada, which is racially diverse, inclusive, and just, evidenced by more participation by racialized people in the worker co-op movement. So our shorter term objectives are to increase awareness about cooperatives and worker cooperatives in BIPOC communities, to promote and create development supports for BIPOC groups and developers, to support existing worker co-ops to increase BIPOC employment membership, as well as serve more BIPOC customers and communities, and to create partnerships and increase engagement and participation with BIPOC or racialized individuals, communities, and organizations. So what kind of activities are we going to do to get to our outcomes here? So for outreach, we want to hold 2 sessions a year on how to start a worker co-op in conjunction with BIPOC organizations. We'd also like to promote CWCF conference and services to BIPOC organizations and promote BIPOC organizations, services and activities in the CWCF network. For development supports, we're going to promote the CWCF's Technical Assistant Grant Program and Tenacity Works Fund in BIPOC communities. In conjunction with other organizations, create a resource board for BIPOC worker co-op development, provide funding to BIPOC worker co-ops and worker co-op developers through the Worker Co-op Racial Justice Granting Pool, seek additional funding in conjunction with BIPOC organizations to enable enhanced support and technical assistance to BIPOC-led worker co-op development. For our existing worker co-ops, we want to research, define, and share effective practices on finding BIPOC worker owners, and also to share effective practices on reaching BIPOC customers and communities, and also identify and search out support for training. Also, we want to create partnerships and find ways to work in reciprocity with racialized communities. So we would like to include more BIPOC people as presenters in conference sessions generally, provide bursaries to students in the Worker Co-op Academy or other co-op development management training, and reach out to BIPOC-led organizations to do needs assessment, then work together to deliver what is needed. So to get to these ends, we've also allocated some of the funding in our 2021-2022 budget. So we have 2 granting pools. We have a new bursary pool for people to take the Worker Co-op Academy and or co-op development or co-op management training. So it's $5,000 over 2 years or $2,500 a year, but we're also seeking additional funds from sponsors. So we do have some criteria that we've created for this with preference for those who identify as BIPOC or if the group is majority BIPOC. Make sure that they really have the need for this and that it's going to actually do something. It's going to go somewhere because it's not that much money. So make sure it's going to be effective. We also have created the Worker Co-op Racial Justice Granting Pool, which is provided from the CWCF reserves in the amount of $20,000 over 2 years or $10,000 a year to support activities based on the projects led by BIPOC organizations, groups, or individuals. Projects that support worker co-op promotion, education, or development. Examples would be a worker co-op education webinar series or an honorarium for a less experienced BIPOC co-op developer to be mentored by an experienced developer, and to provide support to BIPOC enterprises to convert to a worker co-op. So the maximum amount per year is $2,000 per project, but the projects could be funded for more than 1 year. So doesn't sound like a lot, but hopefully we can make this go quite far, especially if we can get some support from other groups. And usually that's where we found that this works. Once you've got some money on the table, other people are willing to step up and add some more to the pool. So what results have we had so far? Well, we're having this workshop at the conference, which is great. So I think it's really fantastic, and we're going to hear from a couple more fantastic groups. We have BIPOC presenters in all or almost all of the sessions at this year's conference. With the intention to share power and to express allyship and solidarity, the CWCF board decided at its meeting in early November that we'll be adding 2 board advisor roles for BIPOC participants. CWCF has an established practice of bringing in advisors to participate along with the board when we are lacking in either a demographic group or specific expertise. In all past cases, bringing in a demographic group we lack around the board table has resulted in our board eventually reflecting that diversity without needing to continue the advisor role. So it's been a bridge to greater board diversity. And another thing that's just happening today, Hazel and Victor Beausoleil from CETSI, Hazel from the executive director of CWCF, they have a meeting with Minister Karina Gould, who is in charge of the Social Innovation and Social Finance Initiative, which was the People-Centered Economy Group has landed this meeting, and they were created from SEDNet. So we're really excited. It's sad that they have to leave the meeting, but just great. Hopefully we get some funding and continuing action to achieve our goal of a worker cooperative movement in Canada that is racially diverse, inclusive, and just. We will continue to actively support our BIPOC members, customers, organizations, allies, and communities with outreach, development supports, engagement, partnership, and funding. So thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Susanna.
Thank you very much for that, Reva. So next up, we have our first speaker and presenter. We have Lucinia Ortiz. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susanna. Greetings from Edmonton, Alberta, part of the Treaty 6 territory. Magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. It means good morning in my native language, Tagalog, from the Philippines. I am pleased to share our experience in the Multicultural Health Brokers Co-op in building racial equity in our organization. But first, let me just tell you a bit about that. Next slide, please. So we started as a group of 18 immigrant women in 1998, providing multilingual prenatal education and support to pregnant women delivering their baby for the first time in Canada. Since then, we have grown to 128 cultural brokers, serving over 30 ethnocultural and racialized communities with programs for infants, children, youth, adults, and seniors. Next slide, please. So what do we do? Our practice, cultural brokering, is a response to the differences that exist in a cultural diverse society such as Canada. We can see these when newcomers find themselves lost in our complex health and social service system, when people of color experience differential treatment in seeking employment, and when a sense of belonging is an aspiration waiting to be fulfilled. Cultural brokers emerge to support people who are marginalized from opportunities by helping them to understand how the systems work, while educating service providers on the context and realities of why people are unable to access these opportunities. Our work starts with supporting individuals and families to access needed services, building groups for mutual support, mobilizing community to take action on issues that impact their lives, initiating collaboration with service providers, and advocating for healthy public policy. We call this our 5 spheres of empowerment, as shown in the diagram on the slides. Our 5 spheres of empowerment, because as we move towards collective effort, we are also building people's capacity to be agents of change and their own development. Next slide, please. So why cultural brokering, and and the ecosystem, the environment that we work with? So community and systems are 2 distinct entities where community can be described as a place, relationship, and a feeling. And in most times, people are at the center. Systems are finite and structured entities. Certainly, each have their own cultural system. Culture brokers create the 3rd space, an arena to mediate differences when these 2 systems collide, from misunderstanding and conflict. These differences often have systemic roots, such as racism, where one's racial identity becomes a predictor of success and well-being. Next slide, please. Thus, the co-op has committed itself to challenging and opposing acts of racism and also to advance racial equity. So how do we do this in our organization? Next slide, please. The co-op believes that anti-racism work and racial equity must start in our own organization. It's just not an accident that members of the co-op are racialized women and men. Thus, we must ensure that we experience racialized equity to achieve our full potential as other citizens in this new homeland. So it starts with to be able to advance racial equity. The co-op believes that this starts with a deep understanding of the context and realities of our lived experience, and more so of our communities. Next slide, please. So the context of and realities of our community um, has three key areas which we hope to focus our own analysis of of the issues and challenges that we face. So people migrate to find a better life that is not accessible in our own homeland because we were impoverished by our colonizers. Then we are further disheartened upon arrival in Canada with experiences of unequal treatment that can persist over time. As you can see, most of us come from colonized nations, and we also experience trauma. And when we arrive, uh, we are disheartened when our prior skills and credentials are not recognized, and we experience discrimination in employment, housing, and education. I think that this is a well-known fact, and we don't need to have uh, statistics and figures to support this. But but you know, these inequities upon arrival really persist uh, on a long-term basis. So our challenges to long-term inclusion and a sense of belonging. For example, it takes us 10 years before we actually earn as much as, you know, as Canadians. So can you imagine having to struggle for 10 years or so? But having said this, we also come with tremendous cultural wealth, as visualized in the diagram. Dr. Tara Yuso's concept of community cultural wealth brings to light a potent cultural resource that has been overlooked and ignored in the discourse of immigrants' contribution to local economies. As you can see, there are 6 of these, but I will only speak about one because it is relevant to our discussion of racial equity. And this is what we call resistance capital. Many immigrants who come to Canada possess this resistance capital that has been largely unacknowledged and unrecognized. Our experience of colonization have left us a historical legacy of engaging in social justice and equity. Our experience of securing equal rights and freedom, tackling challenging conditions in the midst of scarcity, and believing in the collective power of people are potent capacities in the fight against racism and journey towards racial equity. Many of us who have come here have been activists in our home country who fought for freedom and democracy. And so in in our own experience, sometimes this resistance capital as part of our cultural wealth have not been fully harnessed. So at the co-op, we have decided that we want that we want to discover this cultural wealth and harness this as we advance towards racial equity. So how do we do this in our organization? Next slide, please. So it starts, of course, with recruitment and hiring of cultural brokers. We begin by bringing cultural brokers into the co-op who are imbued with the most essential set of capacities needed to work in the third space of mediation and catalyzing change. The lived experience and essential skills are valuable to enable potential cultural brokers to navigate difficult issues and find a more equitable resolution. So how do we find them in the community? We use a range of approaches from the standard job posting in our website to the use of ethnic media to advertise these job postings. We connect with community leaders and we encourage referrals from community networks and partners. Our interviews are conversations over tea and coffee, ensuring that it is a safe place for applicants who may be sharing painful stories. We have cultural brokers who are available to provide language interpretation when applicants find it difficult to explain complex ideas and experience in English. We are mindful of cultural ways of communication, and we also provide questions we might ask beforehand so that applicants can be prepared. So in the recruitment and hiring process, we try as much as possible to reduce and even remove barriers that that applicants might experience in the recruitment and hiring process. Next slide, please. So once our cultural brokers are hired, they go through an orientation and training. So our curriculum for newly hired cultural brokers starts with social analysis. They must be sensitized to recognize issues of injustice from the individual experience to its systemic roots. It is important to frame our support for individuals, families, and communities towards building their resilience to overcome their personal problems, and also to engage them in wider areas of participation. For example, we open opportunities for our program participants to be involved in public consultation by providing them with practical support such as childcare, transportation, and of course, dinner. So as you can see, in this slide, this is how our curriculum actually looks like. When we do our orientation and training, we have grounding concepts around systemic roots of inequities from colonialism to racism. We also have a session on understanding how the healthcare system works and how to work within that to advocate for change. And really, cultural broking, reposition cultural brokering as a practice and process to empower individuals and communities and really build their resilience build their capacity for resilience and advocacy. So all our clients and program participants, we encourage them to participate in research on key issues such as housing and food security, aside from the services that that we provide them. And my example is we truly encourage them to be part of public engagement, whether sitting on committees if those opportunities occur, or actually participating in public decision making. Next slide, please. And the last one is advocacy. To demonstrate that the Co-op as an organization is committed to advancing racial equity in the broader community, we must make ourselves visible through coalition building, advocating on specific issues such as affordable housing, and amplifying inequities through the voices of people with lived experience. The cooperative values and principles and its democratic governance structure has allowed the multicultural brokers to be brave and transformative in its work at the level of individual support and at a broader platform for systems change. So as you can see, here are some current actually examples of how the Co-op's advocacy work within to advance racial equity. So just very recently, we had advocated for Alberta Health Services to collect race-based data so that we can reveal racial inequities during COVID pandemic. We have presented an affordable housing proposal to the City of Edmonton to reduce barriers to housing for restricted families. The City Council has approved this motion, and we are actually on the phase of building a business case for this housing proposal so that we can leverage resources to build it. we are on we are always at the table for any opportunities to advance racial equity. So the co-op has been an active member of the Edmonton Public School Board Advisory Committee, Equity Advisory Committee, for example, and many other tables. We have conducted participatory research on many key issues such as housing, health, and social services. So, and just very recently, the co-op is one of the lead organizations that put together a rapid COVID response specifically aimed to serve ethno-cultural communities. And we had worked with the City of Edmonton, the Province of Alberta, and immigrant serving agencies. This rapid response collaborative actually provides first language support in the area of where you might find rapid testing, where you might get help if you have COVID symptoms. And just very recently, we have pop-up clinics in areas where many racialized communities would be able to access. So with persistent inequities experienced by racialized communities, it is inevitable that we find ourselves working towards racial equity. This is the co-op's commitment, and we will continue to do this as long as we can do it. So thank you, and maraming salamat po.
Thank you so very much, Susenia. I really appreciate you sharing that with us. There's many things that I learned from your presentation, especially I haven't heard of multicultural health brokers before meeting you, and the work that you're doing is really powerful and important. I'm going to encourage everyone to think about questions that you may have, but to hold them to the end so that we can allow enough time for our speakers to be able to speak and have their piece. So if that's okay with you, Lusenia, if we can, if anyone has questions, you can put them into the chat if you like, and that way we can also keep track of them, and then we can ask them at the end. But yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing with us today. So we're going to move next to Wunmi, and if we can stop screen share temporarily, please. And so we can highlight Wunmi, spotlight Wunmi, who's going to be speaking. And I would love to be able to hear about your work with Blooming Ladies Co-op.
Thank you very much, Susan, for a wonderful session. Thank you for having me, everyone. Good morning. Thank you, Lusenia. I actually learned so much from your talk. For me, this is the first time I'm hearing about multicultural health brokers. Though I'm in Alberta, Calgary, so I'm really happy to hear about what you women are doing, and for how long you've been operating. Blooming Ladies Cooperative is quite young. This is our first year. We were incorporated in 2020 December, but we started fully in March this year, so we're still below a year old. So Blooming Ladies Cooperative is a social enterprise. We are working to build a sisterhood of women that are supporting themselves, empowered women that support each other to grow and succeed. We want to create opportunities for women. We want to drive change, and we want to create a lasting legacy for not just ourselves. So whatsoever we're doing, we're looking at continue for it to be able to continuity. We want it to stand the test of time. And then ask me why Blooming Ladies? Why did we start? Another thing for us is we want to provide a space where women are motivated, where women are empowered to thrive in ways that change the trajectory of their lives and their communities, because we believe that when women thrive, communities thrive. If you want to change a community, you start with the women in that community. There's an adage in Africa that says, if you teach a woman to fish, you feed the whole village. So when you teach a woman to fish, you've done so much for the whole village. And for me, I believe that diversity is beyond just race. It's also about women, because when you look at races, yeah, women even come below. For example, a black man and a black woman. A black man has more opportunity than a black woman does. So for us, it starts having women empowered. And I can remember the first time what brought Blooming Ladies about. As a new immigrant in Canada, I attended this training we did in Calgary by making changes. And I saw wonderful women, great immigrant women that have been there before me. And many of the stories were alike in the sense that they were doing great in their countries, they're highly educated, or they've left their businesses that was blooming, flourishing, to come to Canada. They came with high hopes. They had dreams they were to accomplish. And there they were in Canada then, just trying to survive. They had what they call the survivor jobs. In the sense, it's just to pay the bills, nothing more. And for me, that really made me feel bad. Two things came to me. Women, this cannot happen to you. Your dreams cannot die. And two, what can you do to help these women? How can you change the story where it won't be that everything just dies, that your dream dies, and you just grow and just leave. I believe you can thrive. I believe you can bloom. You don't have to just survive. I think that was for me, that was the mission, that was the dream I had. Like, okay, so what can we do? We tried to come together. And at first it was a solopreneur just trying to do events, just do events for women. We'll have different speakers. Because another thing is when you see somebody like you doing what you want to do, it's as a way of inspiring you to do more. So like having a model that you can see and to become more like. So in the journey, Blooming Lady started actually 2017 with events and things like that. But I thought about the last year that if what I want to do is for women to have a say. There's another adage that I say a lot, that if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. That's another African adage. If you want to go together, what's the best business model that you can incorporate that will go with that belief that I had? And then they say the truth, I didn't know so much about cooperative being a business model. Back home, what I knew as cooperative was different. And doing my research, I came about cooperative. And what I realized also is that the education of cooperative is still is much lacking in Canada or worldwide. I believe that, because when I started having that conversation with women in my community, is it putting money together? And I'll get to that later. And we had to come together from the cooperative, but after a lot of conversation, a lot of education, and to get what it really meant to have a cooperative. One of the things I saw is that coming from different parts of the world, we had different understanding of what a cooperative meant. For people back home, and then I'm from Nigeria originally, and we have different tribes and different languages. From where I come from, we call Ajo. Other places in Nigeria call it Osusu. Susu, the different ways, different names being called in West Africa and other parts of the world. And that's what some people know as cooperative, bringing money together and then doing things collectively, either buying a land or buying anything collectively. But there's also another type of cooperative where we put money together, all right, but the time value of money is being put into consideration. So we have bigger cooperatives that they're not credit union. They're also still maybe bigger Osusu or Ajo, you call it, where maybe it could be people from the same office, the same company, put money together. They can now borrow from that money at a percentage, when you pay back, the profit is shared with all members. Also, you could still buy land, you could still buy cars, you could buy different things. So now it's a business model, not just you putting your money together and then sharing it without any interest. This now becomes a viable business for other people. With the fact that we have different forms of cooperative in different parts of the world, and the informal cooperative, I read about the banker ladies in Canada and different parts of different part of the world. I believe one of the things that we can do for inclusion is for Canada to be able to recognize these informal cooperatives, because the truth that they exist. But how can we empower these women to do more? How can we empower how can we give them more power, more capability to do more with their osusu or whatever is being called, to make sure that their community is being empowered? They are being empowered. They know that they can do more, because you can see that a lot of these groups are women. This shows the resilience of women in every community, in every country, in every tribe, in every race. Those women are so focused on taking care of not just themselves. Many times these women are thinking about their children, about the children's welfare, about their family's welfare. Many of these women, they've left their careers or the businesses to focus on taking care of the family. So these women are already resilient, they're already doing things on their own. To talk about inclusion and diversity, it's giving them the power and acknowledging what they're doing and see how can we improve what they have, not change what they have, not bring other ideas, but listen to what they have and see, okay, how can it be improved? Because we already have a lot of informal cooperatives in different communities in Canada. And for us to say really diversity and inclusion, it's beyond just saying, okay, come to workers cooperative, which is wonderful. But we need to listen. We need to listen to the women in the, I'm talking about women because I'm a women's cooperative, and I believe women is also part of being diverse, and the diversity we're talking about, the inclusion. Listen to the women in the community, and they know so much. We know so much. In every tribe, I keep saying that in every race you go to, the women in the community, they might know more than you think they know. They know so much, and they can actually give a lot of insight into what we can do. And then the fact that Canada can tap into the wealth of knowledge of these women and cause things, the cooperative community to grow beyond what they are right now. And talking about education, how can we take this education to the BIPOC community? What is cooperative? What is in it for you? How can we use it to build our communities and to build ourselves? We need to increase the awareness and the support available. I'm so happy when Reba was talking about the different things that
So me, I believe you just got, yeah. We missed the last couple of words of yours.
Okay, yeah, I said what Reba spoke about, spoke about, and Lucia, this talks about things that is happening already in our community. But then can we increase the volume? More like, can we amplify the voice of this, what we are doing in this room, for example, this virtual room, for example? Let the world know, let people know that this is available. Because I believe some people might have different business ideas and want to do it together with people, but they don't even know how to go about it. There are a lot of BIPOC owned businesses that either the owners want to sell or they want to retire or anything, and they don't know how to go ahead. So it's just creating the awareness and the education in BIPOC communities for people to know this is there. It is possible. Because I know that we still face that challenge right now in Blooming Ladies Cooperative, to get people to know this is a cooperative. This is not just an ordinary business. So we need your input. That education is key. That awareness is key. Recognizing and embracing the different systems already in in play in Canada and embracing it, supporting them, creating laws to formalize many or some of these informal cooperatives instead of keeping them informal, because I believe there's so much wealth, there's so much capability and things that can be done with these informal cooperative systems. I call them the hidden cooperative system in Canada. They're hidden, but then they're doing things. So imagine the small group of women being empowered to do more and taking this idea just from one community to other communities. Imagine the ripple effect of just having one drop of water becoming a mighty ocean, because each person's drop is being added to that water to make it a mighty ocean. Can we learn from the method? Can we learn from what is already being done? What can we add to it? You know, so I think those are the conversations that we could have, and to really get the worker cooperative and the cooperative community to be known, to get bigger awareness, and to get even more funding, because I know that funding is a big issue. It's still going to be a big issue. It's just that call for us to work together and see how can we increase funding, how can we increase the awareness of cooperative system for the BIPOC community. So that's just my short talk today. And thank you again. My name is Umi. And yeah, have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much, Wunmi. That was wonderful. I really appreciate the perspective that you're bringing, especially with the work that you've been doing with Blooming Ladies, and bringing so much more sharing and awareness to the different kinds of cooperatives that there are out there. And it does bring into question, how do we legitimize what we think of as a cooperative, and what those different pieces sort of mean. So thank you. Can't wait to get into question time. So next we have Mike DeGagne with Black River Worker Co-op. Do you want to take that away then, Mike? And
Thanks,
also,
Susanna.
oh yeah, slides. Do we have, yes, thank you, Kristen.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I want to take a special minute to say that as a Métis man with 3 young kids, I appreciate all of you being here and doing this work for the next generation that's going to be taking this on, and that will be facing the challenges of our failings. So first of all, I'd like to start with an appreciation for that. So about 8 years ago, my wife and I and our young family were farming and trying to figure out a way to be more sustainable. We did not have a lot of money. We didn't have a lot of resources. And we were part of a lost generation of knowledge whose parents grew up on farms, but left those farms to pursue work in the cities, removing that access to land, to knowledge, and things that had been sustaining our families forever. And we had to find a way to rebuild that. So we moved to a piece of land that we were leasing and trying to find a way to make accessible to ourselves. Next slide, please. So in the small town of Matheson, Ontario, we started a project with a landowner on 176 acres between the Watabag River and the Black River. It was a family farm operation. We were looking to find a way to regain this knowledge and access to all of these things through cooperative farming, cooperative living, living sustainably. So we had a completely off-grid homestead, and to see that lifestyle continued in the next generation of our family and in that immediate community. Next slide, please. Those are our 3 kids. So how we made it work was we looked to protect the land, the 176 acre farm with a land trust. And that was through a cooperative land ownership model. The land itself would be managed by a nonprofit worker co-op that would build the infrastructure, would provide employment, and do work within the community that was based around sustainability, living on the land, and relearning those skills. The land ownership model was to create a land trust with a land donation from the original owner, and to have a succession plan for cooperatives of all kinds to be on that land and managed by the people that were there protecting the water and protecting the last bits of arable land that we have in the province. Next slide, please. Couple of pictures from the farm. So the cooperative itself focused on food security initiatives, educating especially youth and marginalized communities who didn't have access to these these resources. We did some cooperative modeling, and a lot of our work started looking into how to make this lifestyle accessible to everybody, because we didn't have access to it, for financial reasons, for socioeconomic reasons. All different things had excluded us from having this access. And one of the big things that came up about sustainability was that it applies, to your business, it applies to our lifestyle, it applies to everything around us. And so we tried to incorporate regenerative agriculture, but not just agriculture, regenerative living in every aspect of our lives. And aside from the worker co-op, the people that were living and working on the farm had separate businesses that were still able to operate based on the land and based on the work that we did. And we used the cooperative to spread the knowledge and spread the understanding of the work that we were doing. Next slide, please. So the worker cooperative held the land, did the farm maintenance, did the community work, as I said, regenerative education, and the surplus from the cooperative was used to go back into building beneficial infrastructure in the farm. The homesteaders, who were the workers living on the land, leased it and exchanged their labor for access to the things that the cooperative held, including the land, the equipment, the knowledge, and all of those resources in exchange for goods and services. And we had those exchanges with the community as well. And what we started doing, go to the next slide, please, was realizing, especially talking to some of the older farmers in the area, how valuable bartering was. We didn't have money, and we knew people who had things that we needed, and we had things that other people needed as well. And so we started tracking the value of what we were bartering. We realized that it was quite a bit, and wanted to see exactly how beneficial that was. Next slide, please. So we developed a bit of an algorithm to look at the values of the projects that we were doing, how much time was going into them, how much expenditure was going into them, and provide $1 per hour value of what those exchanges were. Next slide, please. And so really what it came down to was looking at the project value, expenditure, time. We could see how much money we were saving by just trading time. And we recognized our time not just at a living wage rate, which was paid back and forth so that there was an actual financial and taxable exchange, not at the $15 an hour, but in Northern Ontario, especially, things can be quite a bit more expensive. So we had a range of around $20 an hour in tracking our time. And through, you can go to the next slide, please. So when we looked at the different things that we were bartering for, it was access, services, and goods, or a combination of those three things. And aside from one small anomaly that you'll see between services and goods, where we received quite a large donation of time from some friends, access was by far the most valuable thing we had. And so we started leveraging that to see how we could make our farm the most efficient and the most profitable. And what turned out from that was the people who needed the access most and who we were getting the most return from were the most marginalized people in our communities. And Wunmi hit it on the head, exactly what I was going to say. If you want to feed a community, if you want to start a meaningful movement, mothers, in our experience, is the way to go. There's nobody that cares more about the security of their family than a mother. And in the North and in our community, especially, it was single mothers and mothers from Indigenous communities. So the reserves around the Timmins area, when we gave access, usually we traded access for labor. When we gave access to our farm and to our skills to people in those communities, not only did we provide we got the labor and we got the value of the work that they were doing, but the effects that it had within those communities are now the basis of another cooperative that we're building that is teaching, in this case, Indigenous women to live and build on their treaty land and accessing those lands and accessing those areas. And so through what initially wasn't, wouldn't fall under JEDI work. Our intention wasn't to be more inclusive. Our intention was to protect the land and water around us. And in doing that, we sought out some regenerative economics, putting out more than we were getting back in to make our business more efficient. And what it ended up doing was giving us a committed, dedicated, passionate membership of people that we were working with in our network who fed into and continue to feed into our business in a way that is immeasurable. We couldn't track the spillover benefit that it's had on our family, on our business, and on our personal lives. And when you get out of, for our business, when we got out of looking at value as a dollars and cents thing and started looking at it as a human thing and trying to quantify value in people, real value, not just financial value, we opened the doors to, unintentionally, to the most marginalized communities, our own communities as well, and have been flourishing because of it ever since, and have been directing the majority of our work at the Black River Co-op and soon to be renamed other co-op that is the most meaningful work that we've ever done, and it's the most successful work we've ever done at the same time. Justice, inclusion, diversity, and equality is the best business model for us, and it's the best business model for our community. Yeah, that's our story.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's so wonderful to be able to hear your story and to have you share those things. And I love how it wasn't something that you necessarily were starting out with initially with the initiatives that you and your family were doing, but ended up being so because of the ways in which you were building those relationships and you were building work into those sorts of things, but also valuing things beyond just the dollar values. I think it's also interesting looking at comparing those different things that you have on the chart there and looking at, what labor and access and all those things, quantify as. So I think that quite often we think about, we volunteer for something or we, offer our skills in something and our services, and to think about all people have something to be able to contribute. And it's really great to be able to find a way to be able to demonstrate that. And just thinking about how the three of you have presented today, it brings me back to the conversation that we were having at the JEDI committee about this session. And I believe it was Victor perhaps who was also talking about, if we're talking about actionable steps and we're talking about what we can do in terms of what we walk away with from this kind of a workshop. And who's really emphasizing things about sharing relationships, sharing power, and sharing capital. And I think the three of you today really exhibited that a lot. in what you were talking about in your initiatives. We're talking about the powers of having this decision-making power, of having involvement and empowering each other with the work that we're doing, especially with things like Blooming Ladies. And we're talking about sharing relationships, like you're talking about, Mike, with being able to bring that community to a different place. And now those things have that ripple effect, right? And also talking about capital. I mean, I think that's really one of the big things too, that is a significant challenge for BIPOC communities, is access to capital because of a lot of the structural systems that are in place. Which is why I'm really proud of the work that CWCF has been doing with the JEDI committee and providing those kinds of access to capital for BIPOC organizations and JEDI work. So yes, thank you very much.